The letter came in the post randomly without a warning. Elterngeld genehmigt. Parental benefits approved. 1,800 euros a month for being at home with my son. And I remember just kind of standing there in the kitchen, staring at the letter, reading it a couple of times. I mean, not because I didn't understand it. I think it was more that it didn't feel real in the way that other things feel real. Because in my entire working life, I never imagined being paid to be a dad before. In the US, most men negotiate 2 weeks off with their boss. It's kind of an awkward conversation, I suppose, a bit of back and forth. But here the government just approved it. No explanation, no justification, no sense that I had to earn it. And I remember just looking over at my husband Martin and saying something like, okay, so this is actually happening. And I don't think I fully understood it in the moment. But I did have this feeling pretty quickly that this wasn't just about money or time off or even policy. It felt like a completely different idea of what a father is supposed to be. If you're not from Germany, the system sounds almost too clean when you explain it. You get parental leave. It's paid around 65 to 67% of your income, up to 1,800 euros a month. And you can split it up to 14 months between both parents. But then there's this detail that kind of changes everything. You only get the full 14 months if both parents take at least 2 each. So it's not just, do you want to stay at home? It's more like, are both of you actually going to show up for this? And I remember when my husband Martin first explained that to me, it felt very theoretical. Like, yeah, of course, that sounds great. Of course we would do that. I mean, why not? And then we had our child. But months before that, during the summer, we sat down with our calendars and all the forms. We even had like these little paper cutouts to represent all the different months, and we were putting there for all the scenarios and situations, trying to figure out who takes which months and what happens if one of us were to change our hours later and how that affects everything financially. And that's the moment where it stops being this nice European concept and starts becoming your actual life. Both being men, we originally wanted to try and split up our parental leave as evenly as possible, potentially going back to work, either 50-50, 60-40, something like that. But the thing is that the practicality of that ended up being almost impossible. This whole surrogacy journey and the preparation that we did before our son was born, and even of course once he was born, we wanted to both be as present as possible equally. So when we had been thinking about how our model would look once we go back to work, we thought, yeah, of course this will also be equal. But the system is just not built that way. Usually it's the mother staying at home longer and the father going back to work earlier. Not always, of course, but I mean, yeah, usually. And that kind of made us sad because we generally wanted to split it up more evenly, but because I commute about 75 minutes each way into the office, we were then suddenly thinking about handovers, train times, what if train delays happen, or like finding a situation where the other person that didn't work in the mornings could work just part-time in the afternoons, and like this basically doesn't exist. So it all sounded good in theory, but ended up being a total logistical nightmare once we actually started down, crunching the numbers, that sort of thing, making all our discussions. So we made some really tough decisions to find a model that worked for us overall in the end, even if it meant that someone did indeed need to go back to work more and the other stay at home more than we had at least originally intended. But that actually was all right for us in the end because I was and still am the one who really enjoys my work and feels fulfilled by it. I have really amazing colleagues. I take fun business trips. I have this vision of where I want my career to go. And Martin was more of like take it or leave it kind of person when it came to his work. Work didn't necessarily fulfill him in the same way it did for me or where he thought it might for him one day. Yeah, he was for years just excited to be able to be a dad. And we went from, okay, we're two dads, we're equal in this, we're doing everything split up, we're going to be super modern fathers, to, just like realizing that this is not the world and reality that allows for that. But I did choose to go back to work part-time and take a bit less pay so that I can spend more time with our son and not just have to see him during dinner, bath time, going to bed, that sort of thing. So fast forward a bit to when our son was born on January 22nd, 2026. So just over 3 months ago. And on paper, that plan made a lot of sense. Martin takes a long block, 12 months, straight through from January 26, January 27, and receives full parental benefits. Just something stable, something that we could rely on. My part was a bit more complicated. Right after the birth, I had 2 months fully covered by my employer, which is actually not the standard here. That was a company benefit. Then from March 22nd to April 21st, I took 1 full month of Elterngeld, capped at 1,800 euros. And after that, I went back to work, but not fully. From April 22nd, so just last week, I shifted to a 32-hour week. And then later in 2027, I have 2 Elterngeld Plus months at the end where I will get 150 euros each while still working my reduced hours before my entire 3-year parental leave period ends. If we have another child, of course, in the meantime, then that will all change again. And if you just look at that on a timeline, it feels very structured, very thought through, like we had a plan that made sense. But when you actually live inside of that plan, it feels very different. April, especially for me, didn't feel like a clean transition at all. It felt more like this strange overlap where part of my life was ending and another one was just starting. But they were both happening at the same time. 1 week, I'm fully at home, completely in this newborn bubble, and then suddenly I'm back at work. Answering tons of emails, trying to focus, but still not fully there, I suppose, because everything at home is still just very intense, very present, and at that point, we hadn't slept properly for months. Days really don't have clear edges anymore, and you're not thinking in meetings or tasks or anything like that. You're thinking still in feedings and naps and in these small windows where you like maybe have 10 minutes for yourself and maybe you finally get your coffee and then you don't even remember what you were gonna do in the first place. So there's this version of parental leave you plan out on paper, and then there's this version that actually happens at, 3 in the morning when no one has slept and you're both trying to figure out what day it even is. And for me, the biggest adjustment wasn't even the baby, it was the space. Because for the first time in a long time, there was nothing external telling me what I should be doing next. I had no real calendar, no deadlines, no constant sense that something is waiting for me somewhere else. And I didn't realize how much I depended on that structure until it was gone. I kept having these small thoughts throughout the day, like, should I be checking something? Should I be checking my email? Am I missing something big at work? Like, is this okay? I was like temporarily stepping out of my real role, and at some point someone would come back and pull me into it all again. And I kept waiting for that moment, for someone to say, okay, that was nice, but now back to normal. But it never came. Germany never sent that message. I just had it in my head. And we talk a lot about money in this system, the 1,800 euros, how it's calculated, how it's capped. But honestly, that's not the part that stayed with me. What really changed things was the permission. There was this one moment, I think about it really a lot now. I was just like out in the middle of the day, walking, pushing the stroller, coffee in my hand, that sort of thing. And I realized that I hadn't been thinking about work at all, like really at all. There was no background noise, no mental checklist for the next day, nothing running parallel, just being there. And it sounds small, but it didn't feel small. Because up until that point, part of me still felt like I was temporarily stepping away from my real life. And in that moment, it stopped feeling temporary. It just felt normal. And that's also where I expected things to feel different socially. Because usually that's where you notice the gap between what a system allows and what actually feels accepted. A dad out in the middle of the day, not working with a baby, that usually means something. People notice, even if they don't say anything. You feel it. And here it just didn't happen. One goes to the playground on a Tuesday morning and there are other dads there. Not occasionally, just regularly. No one is having to explain themselves. No one is justifying why they're there. You kind of acknowledge each other, maybe a small nod or something, and that's it. And even for us, showing up together, both of us, it didn't really change anything. In the US, I think you really feel visible. Here, you feel, I don't know, unremarkable. And then there's the part specific to us, because for a long time, the system was clearly built around one assumption, a mother and a father. And our family just doesn't fit that. We're two dads, so going into this, I absolutely expected friction, especially with the paperwork. And yeah, of course, the forms still mostly say mother, they always do. And at the beginning, you notice it every time. You might hesitate for a second and think like, okay, here we go, or how do I fill it out? I might cross out mother, write father too. And like all of that I kind of expected. But what surprised me was how people handled us. Because that's where things either become complicated or very simple. And in our case, it was mostly simple. Not because everything was perfectly designed for us, of course, but because no one turned it into a bigger issue than it needed to be. It was more like, okay, this isn't the standard case, but we'll figure it out. We really prepared for the worst, and luckily it never came. We were definitely afraid we would get real backlash for being two dads. We never even felt once like we got strange looks, and that really changes the whole experience. Because you don't feel like you're pushing against something. You feel like you're moving through it. The system might still be catching up in places, of course, but the way people actually apply it has already moved things forward. The part I keep coming back to isn't the structure or the money or the forms. It's what that time actually created for us. Because when you're in it, it doesn't feel big, it feels very small. Very repetitive, very everyday. But then you start noticing things. How the baby reacts to you, how he looks at my husband, how the three of us kind of like fall into a rhythm without really talking about it. And you realize that's all built on time. Time when you're actually there, not distracted, not splitting your attention, not thinking about what comes next, just present. There are small things that our son does now, small things that I know exactly where they come from because I was there when they started. And I think about what that would have looked like somewhere else. Not in a dramatic way, just practically. What would our days have looked like if I had gone back to work after already 2 weeks? What would I have missed without even realizing it? And I think that's what really this comes down to. Not Germany versus the US, not which system is better on paper, but something much simpler. What kind of fatherhood is actually possible in your everyday life? So I'm really curious about this. Whether you're watching from, whatever country you're watching from, what does your system actually allow you to do? Not just what it says on paper, but what it actually feels like in practice. And if you have taken parental leave or wanted to and couldn't, I'd genuinely love to hear your experience. Because the more people talk about this honestly, the harder it becomes to pretend there's only one way to do it. Thanks so much for watching. Give this video a like if it resonated, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you next time.